My parents inherited millions, betrayed me, and gave everything to my reckless brother until their greed and lies finally came crashing down. I am a 26-year-old woman, and if you had asked me about my family 5 years ago, I would have said we were close. We were not perfect, but my parents always emphasized hard work, loyalty, and the importance of sticking together through thick and thin. They were not rich, far from it, but they worked hard to give my younger brother and me a decent life. All of that changed when my parents inherited a fortune. It was life-changing money, and what happened next destroyed my relationship with them. Honestly, I still cannot believe it unfolded the way it did. We grew up in a small blue-collar town. My dad worked in construction, and my mom did bookkeeping for local businesses. They always talked about how they were building something better for us. My brother, Jake, who is 3 years younger than me, and I were not spoiled, but we did not go without. My parents taught me to save every penny I could, and made sure I understood the value of hard work. Jake was the golden child growing up. Do not get me wrong, I love my brother, but he was not exactly the most responsible person. He dropped out of college after 1 semester, bounced between part-time jobs, and mostly lived with my parents into his mid-20s. They doted on him, always making excuses, saying he was just finding his way. Things changed for me after I graduated high school. I got a scholarship, moved out, and worked my way through college. I did not ask for much help because I knew they did not have the money. I would visit home when I could, but I mostly kept my head down, working 2 jobs to pay for rent and groceries. It was not easy, but I was proud of what I accomplished. I thought my parents were too, at least that is what they said. Then, out of nowhere, my parents inherited millions. They had a distant relative, someone we barely knew, who passed away and left them everything. Apparently, this relative had invested well and lived frugally, so by the time they passed, they had a fortune to pass on. My parents had always struggled financially, so this was completely out of the blue. We were all shocked, but at first I was happy for them. They finally had the stability they deserved, and I figured they would use it wisely. That is not what happened. Almost overnight, their attitude changed. It started small. They stopped picking up my calls as often, and when I did visit, they would make offhand comments like, "You're so independent now, you don't need us." I thought I was imagining things, until one day, Jake showed up at my apartment driving a brand new luxury car. I did not even know he had gotten his driver's license back. He had lost it a year ago after a DUI. When I asked about it, he shrugged and said, "Mom and Dad thought I needed it to get my life on track." It did not stop there. Jake started posting pictures of lavish vacations on Instagram. Paris, the Maldives, Hawaii. Meanwhile, I was working overtime just to make rent on my tiny apartment. When I asked my parents about it, they would dodge the question or say things like, "We're just helping him out for now." It felt like every time I visited them, Jake had something new. A fancy watch, a down payment on a condo, even a personal trainer. They started treating him like a prince while I got nothing but excuses and vague reassurances. The real kicker came when I found out they had been holding family meetings about managing the estate and had not even told me. I only found out because I stopped by unannounced one afternoon and overheard them talking about it. When I asked why I was not included, my mom just said, "It's complicated." My dad added, "It's not your business. You didn't earn this money." I was stunned. Not only was I being excluded, but they were acting like Jake had somehow earned his way into their favor despite years of being unreliable and, frankly, entitled. The favoritism kept escalating. They started openly comparing me to Jake, saying things like, "If you were more like your brother, you wouldn't be struggling so much." One day, I overheard them talking to a family friend, saying I was a disappointment because I had not lived up to their expectations. That hurt more than I can put into words. I had worked so hard to build a life for myself, but it seemed like none of it mattered to them anymore. At that point, I realized I could not keep pretending everything was fine. It was clear I was being written off, and I knew I needed to do something about it. I could not just let them treat me like I did not matter, but I also knew I could not confront them head on, not yet anyway. They were too caught up in their newfound wealth to see reason. Instead, I decided to bide my time and figure out exactly what was going on behind the scenes. If they wanted to treat me like I did not exist, I would make sure they regretted it. After realizing I had been pushed to the sidelines, I decided to stop waiting for answers and start finding them myself. If my parents were not going to include me in discussions about the inheritance, I would figure out what was going on without their help. I did not have much to go on at first, but I knew one thing: my parents were not exactly financial geniuses. This was not just a gut feeling. It was based on years of seeing them live paycheck to paycheck and struggle to manage even small sums of money. I had a hunch they were in over their heads. The first step was figuring out the basics of the inheritance. I did not have access to every detail, but I remembered overhearing that the fortune came with certain stipulations. I started digging through public records to see if I could find anything. It did not take long to discover that the estate was massive, but it was not just a pile of cash sitting in a bank account. It included properties, investments, and trust funds, all of which required ongoing management. There were also significant estate taxes involved, something my parents did not seem to have accounted for. The more I looked, the more cracks I found. It seemed like my parents were ignoring critical legal and financial steps to maintain the inheritance. They were spending money like it was endless, but they had not paid all the taxes owed on the estate. Worse, they had started borrowing against the assets to fund their extravagant lifestyle. It did not take a financial expert to see that they were digging themselves into a hole. I knew I needed professional advice, so I quietly consulted a lawyer. I was careful to keep this under wraps. I did not want my parents or brother to catch wind of what I was doing. The lawyer confirmed what I suspected. The will had specific conditions that my parents were required to meet to keep the inheritance. For example, they were supposed to allocate a portion of the funds to charitable causes, but as far as I could tell, they had not done anything of the sort. Violating those conditions could jeopardize their entire claim to the fortune. Armed with this information, I decided to test the waters one last time. I visited my parents and tried to have a straightforward conversation about their treatment of me and their financial choices. It did not go well. They brushed me off, saying I did not understand the complexities of their situation. My mom even laughed and said I was being jealous of Jake's success. That stung, but I held my ground and warned them about the risks of their reckless spending. They dismissed me outright, acting like I was making things up to cause trouble. It was during this visit that I realized Jake was actively encouraging them to shut me out. He had made himself indispensable to them, acting as their unofficial financial advisor, even though he had zero qualifications. He was also pushing them to update their will to cut me out entirely, claiming it was only fair since I was ungrateful. That was a new low, even for him. That is when I decided I needed more than just knowledge. I needed evidence. My parents had always been careless about paperwork, and I knew they kept important documents in a filing cabinet in the spare bedroom. The next time I visited, I made an excuse to stay late and managed to take photos of anything that seemed relevant: bank statements, investment reports, and even a copy of the will. It was all there, left unsecured and unorganized. It was almost too easy. Around this time, an unexpected ally came into the picture. My aunt, my dad's sister, reached out to me. She had noticed the changes in my parents' behavior and was not happy about how they were treating me. She did not want to get directly involved but gave me valuable information, including details about the charitable stipulations in the will. She also hinted that my parents' reckless spending was starting to raise eyebrows among other relatives. That is when I decided to stir the pot a little. I started planting seeds of doubt among extended family members. I would casually mention how much my parents were spending or bring up the conditions of the will in passing. It did not take long for rumors to start spreading. Whispers about their financial recklessness began circulating in the community, adding pressure to their already shaky situation. Jake, of course, was not helping matters. During a drunken conversation at a family gathering, he let slip that my parents had taken out a massive loan against one of the properties they had inherited. He was bragging about how they were leveraging their assets, like he was some kind of financial genius, but all it did was confirm that they were living way beyond their means. Then came the breakthrough I was waiting for. While going through the documents I had collected, I found undeniable proof that my parents had not fulfilled key obligations outlined in the will. They were skating on thin ice legally, and it was only a matter of time before it all caught up to them. I decided to speed up the process by filing an anonymous report, prompting an audit of their finances. The fallout was immediate. My parents went into full panic mode as soon as they realized they were under scrutiny. They tried to act like everything was fine, but it was clear they were scrambling. The cracks in their facade were growing, and I knew it was only a matter of time before their house of cards came crashing down. The financial audit triggered by my anonymous report hit my parents harder than I expected. Within weeks, they were contacted by tax officials about discrepancies in their filings. It turned out they had not paid nearly enough estate taxes and had misrepresented the value of several inherited assets. The audit uncovered fines, back taxes, and penalties that added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. For a while, they tried to keep the situation quiet, but it did not take long for word to get out. My parents were not exactly subtle with their spending, and people in the community noticed when the flashy vacations and luxury purchases suddenly stopped. Jake was the first to react. He stormed into my apartment one night, furious, accusing me of sabotaging the family. He claimed that the audit and all the trouble they were facing were my fault, though he could not provide any proof. I barely said a word during his rant. It was not worth arguing. His entitlement was on full display as he shouted about how I had ruined their lives, conveniently ignoring the fact that their mess was entirely self-inflicted. A few days later, I got an email from my parents. It was short and to the point. They were cutting me out of their lives for being toxic. They accused me of turning the family against them and made it clear they wanted nothing to do with me. Honestly, I was not surprised. If anything, it made my next steps easier. Without the pretense of a relationship, I could move forward without worrying about how they would react. I filed a formal legal challenge to the inheritance, using the evidence I had gathered to prove they had violated key conditions of the will. The lawyer I consulted had warned me it would be a long process, but I was ready for it. The case was solid. My parents had ignored the charitable stipulations in the will and had mismanaged the estate so badly that it was at risk of collapsing entirely. The lawyer also mentioned that if my challenge succeeded, the inheritance could be redistributed, or even taken away from my parents altogether. As the legal proceedings began, the situation spiraled further out of control for my parents. Their financial troubles became a topic of gossip in the community, and local news outlets picked up on the story. A particularly damning article highlighted their reckless spending and unpaid debts, making them the subject of public ridicule. They tried to downplay the situation, but the damage was done. People who had once admired their sudden wealth now saw them as irresponsible and greedy. Desperation set in quickly. My parents started selling off assets to pay the mounting fines and legal fees. The car they had bought for Jake was the first to go, followed by one of the properties they had inherited. It was not enough. The more they sold, the more people noticed, and their reputation continued to crumble. Extended family members who had initially supported them began distancing themselves, realizing how badly they had mismanaged the inheritance. Jake, meanwhile, was in free fall without financial support from my parents. His lavish lifestyle came to an abrupt end. He lost his condo when he could not afford the mortgage, and his social media posts shifted from exotic vacations to vague complaints about fake people and jealous haters. It was clear he was not handling the situation well, but I was not about to step in and help. He had made his choices, just like my parents had. Through all of this, I stayed quiet. I did not reach out to defend myself or try to explain my side of the story. I did not need to. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had expected. I continued gathering evidence and working with my lawyer, who uncovered even more violations my parents had made. For example, they had failed to report rental income from one of the properties they had inherited, which added another layer of legal trouble to their already massive pile of problems. Then, out of nowhere, my parents reached out to me. It was not an apology exactly, more like an attempt to fix the relationship. They claimed they missed me and wanted to start over, but it was clear they were only reaching out because they needed help. Their finances were in shambles, their reputation was ruined, and they were looking for a lifeline. I refused. I did not owe them anything, especially after the way they had treated me. Shortly after that, another bombshell dropped. A new document from the will surfaced, showing even more conditions my parents had ignored. This document became public during the legal proceedings, further tarnishing their reputation. It detailed how a significant portion of the inheritance was meant for charitable donations, which my parents had completely neglected. The revelation made them look even worse, and the community's opinion of them sank even lower. In the end, my legal challenge succeeded. The court ruled that my parents had violated the terms of the will and could no longer claim the inheritance. The remaining assets were frozen and would be redistributed according to the original stipulations. My parents were left with almost nothing. Jake, who had been so eager to cut me out of their lives, was now facing the same reality: no money, no support, and no way to maintain his previous lifestyle. I did not celebrate the victory publicly. There was no need. Watching them face the consequences of their actions was enough. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life again, free from their manipulation and toxicity. The court ruling marked the end of my parents' claim to the inheritance. The judge determined they had violated multiple conditions outlined in the will, including their failure to allocate funds to charity and their reckless financial mismanagement. Their behavior left no room for leniency. With the ruling, the remaining assets were redistributed among other family members and the specified charities. My parents were left with almost nothing aside from the debts they had accumulated trying to maintain their lifestyle. Jake's reaction was immediate and dramatic. He cut ties with my parents, blaming them entirely for losing everything. He told anyone who would listen that they had ruined his life by mismanaging the fortune. It was ironic, considering how much he had benefited from their poor decisions. But now that the money was gone, so was his loyalty. He moved out of their house and stopped speaking to them altogether. For the first time in his life, he was on his own, and it was clear he was not handling it well. The financial fallout only got worse. Unable to pay their debts or fines, my parents declared bankruptcy. They had to sell their remaining possessions, including their home. The community, which had once admired their sudden wealth, now saw them as greedy and irresponsible. Former friends distanced themselves, and their social circle shrank to almost nothing. By the end of it, my parents were forced to move into a small rental in a less desirable part of town. They both took on low-paying jobs to make ends meet, a stark contrast to the luxury they had been flaunting not long ago. Jake did not fare much better. Without my parents' financial support, he bounced between jobs. Unable to find anything stable, he had to move into a cramped apartment with roommates and started selling off the designer items my parents had bought for him. His Instagram, once filled with pictures of luxury vacations and fancy dinners, was now quiet. The few posts he made hinted at frustration and bitterness, but the sympathy he was fishing for never came. Throughout all of this, I stayed quiet. I did not post about it on social media or try to explain my side of the story to anyone. The truth was out there, and I did not feel the need to defend myself. Still, I could not help but feel a sense of relief as everything settled. For the first time in years, I was not carrying the weight of their toxicity. I had done what I needed to do, and now I could finally focus on myself. One day, I received a message from a distant cousin. She thanked me for exposing the truth about my parents and shared her own experience of being mistreated by them. It was comforting to know I was not alone in what I had gone through. She mentioned that the redistribution of the inheritance had allowed her to pay off medical bills that had been weighing on her for years. It felt good to know that the money was finally being used in a way that made a real difference. As for my parents, their attempts to reconcile continued. They sent a letter claiming they wanted to start fresh and rebuild our relationship. It was filled with apologies, but none of them felt genuine. They did not mention the years of favoritism or the way they had completely disregarded me. It was clear they were only reaching out because they had nothing left. I did not respond. I was not interested in reopening that door, especially not after everything they had put me through. Instead, I focused on my own future. My share of the inheritance was not massive, but it was enough to give me a fresh start. I used it to buy a modest home and invest in a small business I had always dreamed of starting. For the first time, I felt financially secure. I did not have to worry about making rent or working myself to the bone just to stay afloat. It was not just about the money. It was about having the freedom to live life on my terms. In the months that followed, I reflected a lot on everything that had happened. I thought about the lessons my parents had taught me growing up, the importance of hard work, self-reliance, and loyalty, and how they had abandoned those values the moment money entered the picture. Their betrayal hurt, but it also showed me the importance of standing up for myself and refusing to accept less than I deserved. Now I am building a life without the shadow of my parents' betrayal hanging over me. I have strengthened my relationships with extended family members who supported me, and I have even started making new friends in my community. My business is thriving, and I have found a sense of peace I did not think was possible a year ago. As for my parents and Jake, I do not know what their future holds, and I am okay with that. They made their choices, and now they are living with the consequences. I do not feel the need to gloat or dwell on their downfall. Knowing that they can no longer enjoy unearned wealth is enough for me. At the end of the day, I am proud of the person I have become. I have learned that sometimes walking away is the best thing you can do for yourself. I will always value the lessons I have learned, but I am leaving the toxicity behind. Life is too short to waste on people who do not value you, and I am finally free to focus on the things that truly matter. With everything that happened over the past few years, I was not sure I would ever feel a sense of closure. But now, I can confidently say I have moved on from the chaos my parents and brother created. I no longer carry anger toward them. It has been replaced by something quieter, something like indifference. They are not part of my life anymore, and I have made peace with that. After the dust settled, I started reconnecting with extended family members who had their own stories of being mistreated by my parents. A few cousins reached out, sharing how they had felt excluded or ignored during my parents' rich phase. It was a bittersweet realization that I was not alone in how I had been treated. Together, we have built stronger bonds, finding comfort in knowing we were not the problem. As for my parents, their situation went from bad to worse. They could not afford to stay in the city, so they relocated to a small town a few hours away. From what I have heard, they live in near total obscurity now in a tiny apartment with barely enough to get by. The few friends they still had cut ties after the media backlash, leaving them socially isolated. The blame game between them has not stopped, and their marriage seems to be hanging by a thread. Jake did not fare much better. The weight of our family's ruined reputation seemed to follow him everywhere. Eventually, he moved abroad, hoping for a fresh start where no one knew about the mess he had left behind. But running from your problems does not solve them. He is struggling to find steady work and has burned through whatever savings he managed to take with him. The lifestyle he was used to is long gone, and I have heard through the grapevine that he has become increasingly bitter about how things turned out. One of the most satisfying parts of this whole ordeal has been seeing the charitable portion of the inheritance finally go to the causes it was meant for. Thanks to the court ruling, the funds that my parents ignored were distributed to local charities and community projects. Seeing those organizations thrive, whether it is a shelter expanding its services or a scholarship fund helping students, has been a reminder of how wealth can be used for good when handled responsibly. Meanwhile, my life has completely turned around. My small business is thriving far beyond what I initially hoped for. I have been able to expand my services, hire a small team, and even start giving back to the community. It is not just about the financial stability. I have built something I am proud of, something that reflects my values and hard work. For the first time in years, I feel secure and accomplished. On a personal note, I have also started dating someone who truly values resilience and independence. They have been incredibly supportive, and it is refreshing to be with someone who understands what I have been through without trying to fix or change me. It is early days, but things are going well, and I am optimistic about the future. My parents have not stopped trying to reach out, though their attempts have become more desperate. Recently, they sent a handwritten letter begging for forgiveness and asking for help. The tone was manipulative, filled with guilt-tripping and veiled accusations. They claimed they had done their best and blamed the situation on circumstances beyond their control. I did not respond. I saw it for what it was, another attempt to reel me back into their drama. I have worked too hard to build a life free from their toxicity to let them drag me down again. In contrast, the community I have built around me now is one of support and understanding. I have made new friends, joined local groups, and found people who genuinely care about me. It is a stark difference from the relationships I had with my parents and brother, where everything felt like a transaction. These connections fill the void that their absence might have left, and I am grateful for them every day. Jake, however, has not let go of his bitterness. He recently posted a long-winded rant on social media, blaming me for the family's downfall. The post was filled with exaggerated claims and outright lies, but it did not gain much traction. The few comments it received were unsympathetic, with some even calling him out for his entitlement. It was clear he was trying to garner pity, but no one was buying it. Reflecting on everything, I have realized how much I have rediscovered about myself. The lessons my parents claimed to value, hard work, fairness, and self-reliance, are the same ones they abandoned the moment money came into the picture. But they are also the values I have held on to, and they have guided me through this entire journey. In some ways, their betrayal forced me to become stronger and more self-assured than I ever thought possible. The legal case surrounding the inheritance is now officially closed. With my parents losing all avenues for appeal, there is nothing left for them to fight over. The remaining funds have been allocated as intended, and I have decided to donate a portion of my share to causes I care about. It feels like the right way to honor the original intent of the will and create a legacy my parents never could. Looking back, I acknowledge the pain of their betrayal, but I also see the strength it gave me. It taught me to set boundaries, stand up for myself, and recognize my own worth. I am no longer defined by their actions or the toxic family dynamics I grew up with. Today, my life is peaceful, fulfilling, and entirely my own. I have closed the chapter on that part of my life, and I am moving forward with clarity and purpose. The past may have shaped me, but it does not define me.